Hello everybody on the internet. This is Viva Frei, former Montreal litigator turned current Florida rumbler. Going to do a vlog breakdown of the Jack Smith amicus brief. It's actually not Jack Smith's amicus brief. It's a former Attorney General of the United States. People have been asking for this, asking what I think of this. We talked about it during this morning's live stream, but not everybody has the bandwidth, pun intended, to sit down for an hour-plus live stream. So I'm going to do a condensed summary of a vlog for everyone else out there for ease of sharing. Now, by the way, absolutely beautiful behind me. This is the Missisquoi Bay in Venise, Quebec. And if that ice broken up behind me looks kind of familiar, that's because I went for a polar plunge in it this morning with my wife, and it was good. Just flash clip right there so you can see the misery that we went through to get that brown fat building in our body. Just make sure your heart keeps beating.
Heart's still beating.
Take the camera, please.
You think you're gonna do it?
I'm gonna be outdone by my wife. Let's get this party started.
It's like a controlled activation of your immune system and your brown fats. And,
oh yeah?
Because then you get out and you're forced to warm up. So it like
Joe Rogan, this is for you. Get the brown fats going. So a lot of people have been asking me what I think about this amicus brief in the DC case where Jack Smith, a special counsel Jack Smith, whose appointment has now been formally called into question, whether or not Jack Smith petitioned the court for certiorari to hear this case on Trump immunity on an expedited basis. Jack Smith wrongly framed the question as whether or not Trump, a president, has immunity for crimes committed as a president. Trump, in his retort, said, no, they're framing the question wrong. The question is whether or not Trump has immunity for presidential acts carried out in the context of his presidency. Well, there's this random amicus brief that popped into the petition to the Supreme Court, and it calls into question Jack Smith's authority to even have done anything in the first place in this particular case. We're going to read through this. An amicus brief, oh, I'm in trouble. An amicus brief, for those of you who don't know, is what they call a friend of the court, amicus curiae, friend of the court, someone who's not a party to the suit, but whose presence might be necessary for a full resolution of the dispute. You need to ask for permission from the court to be recognized as a friend of the court, an amicus curiae. Basically, anybody who has something of an interest can petition the court for amicus standing to have their voices heard. This particular individual wants his voice heard because he doesn't think Jack Smith has ever been lawfully appointed, which would call into question and basically invalidate everything Jack Smith has ever done after being appointed special counsel by Merrick Garland, a man who was within a hair, an angel's breath of the Supreme Court of the United States, who might have something of a vendetta against the Trump administration and might now be carrying out that vendetta by allegedly improperly appointing special counsel Jack Smith to go after Donald Trump, because the people who scream and cry that Trump is a tyrant will never relinquish power once he's gotten it. Even though he relinquished it the last time he had it, they need to prevent him from coming into power. So the people accusing the other person of being a tyrant might themselves, lo and behold, be the tyrants. The amicus brief, what's it all about? The amicus to the Supreme Court of the United States starts off with the question they'd like the Supreme Court of the United States to answer, and that question, as framed by the amicus, is as follows. Question presented: whether private citizen Jack Smith lacks authority to represent the United States, which jurisdictional requirement must exist at all stages of litigation and which cannot be waived in filing his petition for a writ of certiorari in this court? Question mark. I still haven't figured out why that question, which is stated as a statement, has a question mark at the end, but I'm Ron Burgundy, people. I read everything as it's drafted.
I'm Ron Burgundy?
I love how they're calling Jack Smith private citizen, not special counsel, not some title that has been bestowed on him by a corrupt and weaponized judicial system. Private citizen, because at the end of the day, if this is true, he is nothing more than a private citizen who has been appointed, hand-selected by a corrupt Merrick Garland to run the most corrupt prosecution in my lifetime. Oh, hi there. I have been sitting here pontificating as to when I spoil the punchline of this entire vlog. I'm raiding my father's cigar cabinet and liquor cabinet. Booyah, I don't even like cigars, but I do like the scotch. Here's the punchline to this entire vlog. Jack Smith's motion to expedite to the SCOTUS was declined by the SCOTUS, so this is going to go through the DC Court of Appeal, which means that this entire amicus, for the time being, is disregarded. From what I understand, they can refile if and when this ever gets to the Supreme Court. But for now, everything you're about to watch, irrelevant except for what's stated in that amicus. It can be refiled. But for now, it's been disregarded because this is going to go through the appellate process at the DC Court of Appeals. I hope I can taste this with my cold here. Oh, I can.
And now you know your vlog.
Well, it's not over yet. I'm not going to go through the entire amicus brief. It's 32 pages, but like the summarized, condensed version of the 4 questions that need to be answered are summarized in basically 10 pages, like 1/3 of the actual amicus. So we're going to focus on those 4 questions. But first, we need to know who has filed this amicus brief. In the Supreme Court of the United States petitioner versus Donald Trump, on petition for a writ of certiorari before judgment to the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. Brief of former Attorney General Edwin Meese III and law professors Stephen G. Calabresi and Gary S. Lawson as amici curiae supporting neither party. The first 10 pages, they lay out the questions, the facts, the details, and the next 20 pages just fleshes out the jurisprudence in greater detail. The intro summary does a great job, and we'll start with the introductory paragraph, which frames all of the questions. This court should reject Mr. Smith's request for certiorari before judgment for the simple reason that he lacks authority to ask for it, nor does he have authority to conduct the underlying prosecution. Those actions can be taken only by persons properly appointed as federal officers to properly created federal offices. Neither Smith nor the position of special counsel under which he purportedly acts meet those criteria, and that is a serious problem for the American rule of law, whatever one may think of the defendant or the conduct at issue in the underlying prosecution. And then the amici get into a brief timeline of events, and it all starts with Merrick Garland, who was denied his confirmation hearings to be appointed to the Supreme Court because the argument was that under a lame duck presidency, you don't appoint a Supreme Court justice in the last year. He was denied his confirmation hearing. He was an angel's breath, a drop of sweat away from the Supreme Court, denied to him for an eternity. And lo and behold, it looks like he holds something of a grudge. And on November, whatever it was, 8, 2022, some might say that he began to act out that grudge against Trump and the Republican Party, but mostly Trump. In fact, almost exclusively Trump. The illegality addressed in this brief started on November 18, 2022, when Attorney General Merrick Garland exceeded his statutory and constitutional authority by purporting to appoint Smith to serve as special counsel for the Department of Justice, DOJ. Smith was appointed, quote, to conduct the ongoing investigation into whether any person or entity, including former President Donald Trump, violated the law in connection with efforts to interfere with the lawful transfer of power following the 2020 presidential election or the certification of the Electoral College vote held on or about January 6, 2021, end quote. Bear in mind, people, if it's not patently obvious that the same people who are screaming about election interference, yada, 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 tyranny, tyrants who are never going to leave office, they are the ones engaging in election interference. They are the ones literally trying to remove the name from the ballot so that they have a greater chance of remaining in power. It's confession through projection, but it is nothing less than overt election interference. Then we go through the 4 main arguments as to why private citizen, not special counsel, lowly private citizen, no capital P, no capital C, Jack Smith has no authority to do what he's doing, was unlawfully appointed, and we'll go through those very quickly. First, the Appointments Clause requires that all federal offices, quote, not otherwise provided for, end quote, in the Constitution must be, quote, established by law, end quote. And there is no statute establishing the Office of Special Counsel in DOJ. The statutory provisions relied upon by DOJ and lower courts for the appointment of special counsels over the past half-century do not authorize the creation and appointment of special counsels at the level of United States attorneys. Second, even if one overlooks the absence of statutory authority for the position, there is no statute specifically authorizing the Attorney General, rather than the President, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, to appoint such a special counsel. Under the Appointments Clause, inferior officers can be appointed by the department heads only if Congress so directs by statute, and so directs specifically enough to overcome a clear statement presumption in favor of presidential appointment and senatorial confirmation. No such statute exists for the special counsel. And here I, as a lowly nincompoop of a Canadian with not a full mastery of the American Constitution, I'm sitting there asking, who the hell confirmed Jack Smith to this position? You know, when someone gets appointed to the Supreme Court, to any federal office, you have confirmation hearings. You have both parties asking questions to hear what the person's about, their credentials, their ability to carry out that function that they've been appointed to. In this case, willy-nilly, pick it out of a hat. Jack Smith, you're now special counsel, courtesy of Merrick Garland. It made no sense from the beginning. And if you have been watching Viva and Barnes for long enough time, you know that we talked about this from the very beginning, in that Jack Smith, if he's handpicked by Merrick Garland and basically answering to the president, why, he is a presidential agent, basically now persecuting the main rival of the sitting president. Who are the tyrants here exactly? Third, the special counsel, if a valid officer, is a superior or principal rather than inferior officer, and thus cannot be appointed by any means other than presidential appointment and senatorial confirmation, regardless of what any statutes purport to say. Again, I don't fully fully appreciate the nuance between a superior officer and an inferior officer, but if the argument is true, well, as a superior officer, he needed to go through Senate confirmation hearings in order to be properly appointed, which didn't happen in this case. Hence, his appointment is unlawful and invalid from the get-go. And as per the argument, everything he's done subsequent to that unlawful appointment is itself unlawful and has no business to exist any longer. What federal statutes and the Constitution do not allow, however, is for the Attorney General to appoint a private citizen who has never been confirmed by the Senate as a substitute United States attorney under the title, quote, special counsel, end quote. This is what happened on November 18, 2022. That appointment was unlawful, as are all the legal actions that have flowed from it, including Citizen Smith's current attempt to obtain a ruling from this court. It's a very interesting argument, one that I'm very curious to see if the court takes up and how they resolve it. But before I share my thoughts and predictions for whatever they're worth, just to identify and elaborate on who the three petitioners for amicus are. Given their interest in the rule of law, the legal issue addressed in this brief is of particular importance to Amici. The Honorable Edwin Meese III served as the 75th Attorney General of the United States after having served as counselor to the President, and is now the Ronald Reagan Distinguished Fellow Emeritus at the Heritage Foundation. During his tenure as Attorney General, the Department of Justice steadfastly defended proper limits on federal power. For their part, Professors Calabresi and Lawson are scholars of the original public meaning of the Constitution. Members of this court have cited their work in the past. I'll include the link to the full amici if you want to read the entire thing, but the next 20 pages just flesh out in greater detail the prior 10-ish pages, just to get to the conclusion, because the conclusions typically are always zingers. Conclusion: not clothed in the authority of the federal government, Smith is a modern example of the naked emperor. Improperly appointed, he has no more authority to represent the United States in this court than Bryce Harper, Taylor Swift, or Jeff Bezos. That fact is sufficient to sink Smith's petition, and the court should deny review. We express no views on the merits issues addressed in Smith's unauthorized petition. Being a Canadian schnook who has never really been involved in sports, I know who Taylor Swift and Jeff Bezos are, but I didn't know who Bryce Hayden was. Apparently he's a baseball player. He's very well known. I'm just an idiot for not knowing this. All right, that's the petition. They're basically asking the court to declare that Smith's appointment was unlawful from the get-go, and everything he has done subsequent to that unlawful appointment should basically be disregarded. My prediction as to what's going to happen: mental gymnastics to dismiss this amici or not hear it in the first place, and even if one were inclined to hear it, at some point, I've made the analogy, this is sort of like having built a house without lawful permits at the government's request, or something along those lines. You built the house without the proper permits. The government wants the house. Are they going to come in and order you to destroy the house because you didn't obtain lawful permits? No. They'll find a way of getting around it. Maybe they'll just usurp the house, nationalize the house, and they'll say, okay, it's my house now. And what's going to happen here? If he was unlawfully appointed in the first place, they're not going to disregard and throw out all of the work that he's done, the prosecutorial, malicious persecution, partisan hackery, election interference. They're not going to throw all of that out. That would be like raising the house to the foundation after it's already been built. They'll say, all right, well, here's your permits retroactively, or all right, you didn't have the permits. We'll find a solution that doesn't involve destroying all of the hard work that has already been done. To me, there's not a snowball's chance in hell that they're going to say, yep, Smith is out and all of these prosecutions are being dismissed. These indictments are being dismissed as well. It would be too absurd to go back in time at this point. The cat is out of the box. Pandora's box has been opened. They've crossed the Rubicon. They can't pretend like it never happened. They've raised a number of serious questions here that need to be addressed by the courts, Smith's lawful appointment or not. So they'll find a way to get around it. That's my prediction. Or alternatively, if they do say, well, we're dismissing this claim on presidential immunity, and in any event, Smith's appointment was unlawful, shame on you, POTUS, never going to happen. That's a possibility as well. I would, however, defer to Barnes's prediction on this. Robert Barnes, my partner at vivabarneslaw.locals.com, to see what he has to say. That's my prediction. That's the amici. It's interesting. A lot of us have been saying from the get-go that this reeked of political bias, political persecution, because you have Jack Smith under the title of special counsel, seemingly answering to nobody, but appointed by Merrick Garland, and seemingly answering only to Joe Biden and Biden's Department of Justice, which is a total injustice, total election interference, and finally someone is calling it out and asking for the courts to adjudicate on it. We'll see what happens, and I'll follow up on this if and when there's ever a decision to follow up on, to be determined. By the way, if you like what I do, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below. If you want to support the work that Robert Barnes and I do, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. $7 a month for the rest of the month. $7 a month, $70 a year at the discount rate if you get a year. It's going up in January. So if you want to get locked in, grandfathered in, grand-personed in at $7 a month, get in now before the month is over. Twitter, Viva Frei, Rumble, Viva Frei. More important than anything, stay off the roads on New Year's Eve. Please don't drink and drive. Enjoy time with friends and family. Try to deal with the stresses of the holidays. What's the expression? Deal with them I don't know, lightly. Get over them, enjoy the time, get out in as much as you still can. It's what, 3:15, it's getting dark out here. Get some exercise, talk to friends and neighbors, and now you know you belong. Peace out, peeps. Oh God, my back hurts so much. Oh.